Everyone who listens to this program and watches it too knows that I love my Irish heritage. It's Michael Patrick Shiels, radio stations across the state of Michigan. In Michigan, counties like Wexford and Antrim and Roscommon. And I was in Harbor Springs a couple of weeks ago walking downtown there, and there's a little shop that sells golf memorabilia. I stopped in there to have a look around, and the owner of the shop said we're going to have a book signing pretty soon. And it's going to be this fella right here, and he pulled out a book that was the size of a Volkswagen. It was a serious tome of work, and it was done by David McDonnell, who's from Michigan, and the book is called Clandonnell, A Storied History of Ireland. He's on the other end of our AT&T line right this very second. Grew up in Redford, not far from Corktown, in fact, and I guess drivable to the Irish Hills, too. We do have lots of Irish heritage spread throughout our state, don't we, sir?
We do. And you mentioned the county names. As I did my search and just tried to learn more about the Irish clans and where they originated, and spent a lot of time studying Clandonnell, I was surprised to discover that they originated in County Antrim, which is exactly where I live, in Antrim County in northern Michigan. So it's a lot of county names, yes.
Good for you living in pure Michigan there in northern Michigan, and we're heard on WJML and WJNL in that region too, and County Antrim too. So this book, it takes us, as the man who owns the store told me, this book takes us on a very readable journey through Irish history, but it's done in novel fashion.
It is. It's nonfiction. They're true stories, but they're true stories of. It's a history in the sense that it's real people, real times. What they did, what they faced, what issues they faced, circumstances that they overcame, and sometimes the circumstances that overcame them. But it's very readable, and it takes you through several thousand years of clan era and a clan in Ireland, and that overlapped and also settled in Scotland. But in the course of learning about, reading about these interesting, actually fascinating people, you do learn a bit of the history of the island and what the Irish faced and for several thousand years.
I always thought...
I took descendants further to modern times. I'm sorry.
I always thought it was kind of funny, too, speaking... When you go to Boyne Resort, it's all German themed because it's an alpine ski resort, but the name of the resort is in a river
Boyne,
in Ireland.
Yeah, the River Boyne, yes, which is a well-known river because it was a... I actually describe, the Battle of the Boyne. Again, I did so not so much, both because it was a historical significance, but I did it because they were members of the clan there. And I focused on what got them involved in that whole affair, the Jacobite-Williamite War. And again, when you read about history and you talk about the Jacobites and Williamites, that's when the brain turns off and you don't want to read anymore. But when you talk about people and what they were involved in and how these struggles were important to their lives, then it brings that whole dispute, to life. And you get to understand how those events have significance to how the Irish lived before and after an event like the Battle of the Boyne.
Ireland is called the land of letters and poets for good reason?
Absolutely. And it goes back to the clan era, when the clans were fairly tight-knit groups, related, sometimes distantly related as family members. They may have shared the same great-grandfather would live within a fairly close region, and they'd work together. They had divisions of labor, and shared the cattle and the crops and whatever. But at the end of the day, particularly when a lot of work was done, they had festivals and parties, and people would play music, and some people would dance, and the storytellers would then come to life. They would stand by the fire and tell stories, and people were fascinated with these stories, and they go on, and whoever was a good storyteller was a well-respected person in the community. And that's a tradition that's lived on, both storytelling and just conversation. The Irish respect people with wit and spoken word and written word come together, and they love turns of phrases, and so so that whole tradition is carried forward to modern times.
Does St. Patrick make an appearance in your book?
He does. More of a turn of event, which actually was a very significant event, which was before he arrived. The Celtic Irish were followed a couple of different pagan religions, and by the time St. Patrick died, everybody was Christian. But it does so in an historical context, which is no one knows much about what St. Patrick did. So I don't spend a great deal of time on it. What is known is the result. When he died, again, just about the entire island was Christian. And as you talk about an abbey or a cemetery or anywhere, any of these old facilities in Ireland, almost every one of them was a place that people claim, at least, that St. Patrick was there.
I presume we only have about 30 seconds left, but
okay.
The famine and the troubles make appearances too?
They do. The famine, which in Ireland is called Angortamor, the Great Hunger. Famine is kind of a misnomer because all crops other than potatoes still survived, and there was a lot of food in Ireland. The problem was it wasn't available to the people that were starving. And famine sounds more of an agricultural failing versus a political economic. So it's called Angortamor, the Great Hunger.
Stand by 1 minute. We'll get more from David McDonnell, the author of Clandonnell, right after this. David McDonnell is with us, the author of Clandonnell. He's from Michigan, and it's a storied history of Ireland. And we were just talking about the famine and the fact that there was food in Ireland but not available to people. Isn't it largely due to the British, the English, if you will?
Yes, the way Ireland fit into the British Empire, it was the supplier of food. And it grew a great deal of wheat and barley and oats, and it grew raised a lot of cattle and sheep. And it fed the empire and fed the British soldiers who were wherever they were in the 19th century. And export of all those foods continued during the famine when the potato failed. All that food was still shipped out to England and the rest of the empire, but it wasn't available to the starving Irish. They were living in smaller and smaller parcels of land, and the only crop they could grow to feed their family in those small parcels were the potato. So when the potato failed, people starved, to be blunt about it, and starvation-related diseases, and that ultimately led to them not paying rent, and many of them being evicted, and the mass immigration to primarily the United States, but also to other parts of the world. Ireland saw about half its population either die or leave during those very, very difficult years.
Before you even put the discrimination against the Catholics on top of it, you can see
why. Exactly.
To this day, there remain at least vestiges of the Troubles, true?
It does. They don't really have that kind of issue in the South. In the North, it's still vestiges there. Once in a while, you hear of incidences, but it was a very difficult period of time until about the 90s, and it's been evolving in the right direction since then. It finally got to the point in the 90s where the sane people in the middle took control versus the extremists on both sides. And actually, a trip to Northern Ireland is a wonderful trip, and people don't put it on the radar even because they're afraid of, policemen at every corner or soldiers at every corner.
Yeah, you can get plenty of beauty and also plenty of political intrigue there if you go looking for it in Derry and Belfast, too. Go looking for Clandonnell. You can find it online and at bookstores everywhere, particularly in Michigan. A Storied History of Ireland by David McDonnell. Slán go fóill and Pogue Mahone, sir.